In this video, we're going to be checking out what the manufacturer claims to be one of the best hobbyist 3D printers on the market. We're going to put it through its paces and find out if that's true. So welcome to the Do It Yourself Dad channel and welcome to Tech Tuesdays, where we take a new bit of technology, bring it home, put it through its paces, and then we give you all the pros and cons in an unbiased review. Now you're going to want to stick around to the very end of the video for two reasons. One, this video is launching on Halloween, so I have a very special Halloween print that we're going to do at the very end of this, but at the end of the video is also when I go over all the pros and cons, so you can make a decision whether this printer happens to be the right printer for you. And this week we're playing around with the Ankermake M5C 3D printer. Now you may have seen some of the Anker printers on the market before. They had one before this which was a little bit more high tech. It actually had a camera on board that would watch the print and it would shut the print down if something went wrong. Now this is essentially the less expensive or the light version of that printer. This does not come with the camera and it doesn't come with a screen. So you control it using your phone or through your laptop. Now just to show you that this is not my first rodeo with a 3D printer, I have dragged some of my other ones over to the workbench, at least the ones that I still have. This thing is going to be coming in an upcoming video. This is the cheapest and I think smallest 3D printer you can buy, and this is one we've had on the channel a while ago. This is my longer LK5 Pro. And then the printer that started it all for our family, this is the DaVinci 3-in-1 from XYZ Printing, and this actually was a birthday present for my daughter from my parents years ago. Now, I don't do unboxing videos on this channel, but I did want to show you the basic assembly process, and I followed the directions step by step because I wanted to see how good the directions were. A lot of the directions I've gotten with other printers have been, let's be honest, garbage. These were actually pretty clear, and I got it together pretty quickly. It's just an issue of tightening up a few screws, hooking up a single wiring harness, downloading the app, and getting the whole thing set up for your first print. I do want to point out one thing before somebody mentions it in the comments, and that is through the course of this video, you're going to notice the color of my workbench changes. My workbench looked terrible. It was beat and covered with dents and stains and whatnot, so I decided to stain the whole thing black. So now it looks terrible with a coat of black stain on top of it. So now with the printer assembled, it's time to turn it on, switch on the back, and we're going to set it up actually in the app. This is the first 3D printer I've had where I'm actually going to set the whole thing up in an app. So I've downloaded the Ankermake right here, and we're going to get it set up. So we're going to go to Add Printer, and this is the M5C. So we're going to set up the M5C, and we found it right there via Bluetooth. We're going to press the play button of the printer, and now we have connected. We're going to now connect it to our home network. You can see now our home network name is HAL. If you know where we got that network name, please leave a comment down below for us. And the printer has been added to the account. So let's get her going. So the first thing I want to do before I do anything else is I want to actually level the print bed. So let's do the auto leveling. So let's get it started. It's going to go ahead and level itself. So now it's time to print our first 3D print. We're going to print a Benchy. If you're not familiar with 3D printings, Benchy is a benchmark print. It looks like a little tugboat, and it gives you an idea of how well the printer is printing. A typical Benchy print will take anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours. They have it set up to show off the speed of this printer, and it can print it in just about 17 minutes, which is nuts. The fastest I've ever seen a 3D printer print. So I'm trying my best to get a view inside the roof of the wheelhouse, and same thing. I'm really not seeing much issues in there, and that's a long gap for that thing to have to span. So I'm really impressed. Now you are seeing lines in this thing, but it is also in the super high speed version. We're going to try some prints now using their smaller tip and on a precision setting and see what kind of precision stuff we can get out of this printer. Now I'm sure it was clear I am impressed with how fast it printed a Benchy, but I also want to be totally honest here and give it a fair shake. It printed the file that they prepared for Benchy. So they prepared a file to print as fast as possible and as well as possible on their printer. Later on in the video, I'm going to be printing some of my own files run through their slicer to really give this thing a fair shake, because that's the fun of 3D printing. It's not printing files that other people have made, but making your own stuff. So we're going to print some of my own files off it, but right now I want to play around with the resolution setting and nozzle changes. This thing comes with a 0.4 nozzle but can run 0.2, so we're going to print one of their models with a 0.4 and again with a 0.2 so we can see the difference and see how fine a resolution you can get out of this thing. So we're going to jump into the app and print a file. Now I just started the file, and because this is printing in precision mode, it's not in that super high speed mode. This is a 9-hour print, so I am going to go to bed and check on this thing in the morning. Okay, it's the next morning. Print is done. This print took about 8.5 hours, and for a print this size on one of my other printers, probably would have taken a little bit longer. But let's take a close-up look and see what we got. This is with the 0.4 nozzle. So coming in really close to this thing, you see some of the typical artifacting that you would see with a 3D print. You can see they're at the very top of the spear, or whatever you want to call that, the tower. There's a little bit of stuff going on. There's a little bit of threading right there. But this is all typical stuff you would see with a 3D print, and this is still actually very high quality. I noticed down here this flat surface is extremely smooth. So for a 0.4 nozzle, this is pretty darn good, but 3D prints are never perfect. You're going to see stuff like that. So what I want to do now is get this off the build plate, change the nozzle out to the 0.2 nozzle, re-level this thing, and print again and see, one, how much longer it takes using the smaller nozzle on the fine setting, because I assume it will take longer. It's putting out less plastic. But also get another close-up look and compare the two side by side to see how we've done. So let's get this thing off the bed. I didn't show you on the last one, so it is a magnetic bed. You pull it up, and this sucker pops right off once you kind of warp the bed out. So we re-leveled the print bed and got a new print going. We're going to do the exact same print, but with the 0.2 nozzle. So we're coming up on 24 hours after we started the print. This thing should be finishing up in about 3 hours or so. We're in the final roof of the castle. I can already notice a lot of the finer detail, the little windows and stuff like that in there are much more detailed. The slower speed is to be expected. The layer height is much, much shorter, and the nozzle is half the size, which means the amount of plastic it's putting out, in theory, is about 50%. So I got the notification on my phone today, right before lunch, that this thing was done. So I just got back home and we're checking it out. So let's get close up and see what we've got here. So looking up close, these details are very, very nice. Those windows, which those would really be some of the hardest stuff. And then the tops on these spires here, I'm trying to get it to grab focus there because it's such a small little part. Really came out quite nice. Now, I already popped the thing off the print bed. So let's move this thing to the side and grab the one that we did with the larger, with the 0.4 nozzle, and look at those details again. So we can see there the windows. This is on the 0.2. If we move over to the 0.4, you can still see the windows, but they're not quite as pronounced. Some of the other really small details, you can see a little bit of filaments, a little fuzz hair going on there. Let's come over to this one. Not seeing the same thing on this one. So on my computer, I've loaded up Ankermake. That is the slicing software that is designed for this printer. My understanding is you can still use Cura, you can still use USB sticks and put them straight into the USB drive on this thing, but I'm going to use the software it came with. And what we're going to do is I've downloaded, I mentioned that file before, so I've downloaded a file here. I'm going to bring it on in, and we're going to go with the highest resolution of the file. I'll show you kind of here what it looks like. So it is a very, very complex figurine, and in theory, I can print this without any supports. So I'm curious to see how long it's going to take to print this one. It is still a pretty good size model, but we're using the 0.2 tip, and we're doing it on the basically the normal resolution, not the super high resolution. So right now it's going to slice this object out. It'll tell us about how long it'll take, and then we'll send it over to the printer and see what happens. So for this print, I wanted to try different filaments, so we're running PETG, which prints a little bit different than PLA. It all should be noted that with this filament, you do also have to run a 0.4 nozzle. You cannot run the 0.2 nozzle, so I swapped the nozzle out, or so I thought. We were doing so good, and then I made spaghetti, and then I looked at my workbench, and I realized, if you remember before we started with the 0.4 nozzle, that was this one. Then I switched it to a 0.2 nozzle. That was this one. And I thought I switched it back to a 0.4 nozzle, which would have been this one. There's a nozzle in there. And this is my 0.4. I had a bunch of 0.2s on my workbench. I think I might have put another 0.2 in there and then told the slicer it was running a 0.4. So that might have been my problem. So I'm going to heat it up, pull that nozzle out, see if that's what I did wrong, put the correct nozzle back in, and try this again. And guess what? I just pulled it out. My hunch was correct. I swapped a 0.2 nozzle with a 0.2 nozzle. I've got a 0.4 in there now, so we're going to try this again with the correct size nozzle. Well, that didn't quite go according to plan. If you look underneath all this spaghetti, it was doing pretty good, but I've even noticed here, it's pretty brittle and has some layer adhesion issues going on in all the spaghetti, and in reviewing the video, his head fell off, and that's what kind of caused the big problem at the end. Now, this is PETG, and PETG is really susceptible to moisture, and this is an old roll that has been floating around forever, so I'm actually going to pull it off here, throw it in my filament dryer, get it dry. I'm going to try it again in a little bit. Now let's pull it out, and we'll play around and make some more prints. So right now what it's printing the exact same figurine, but we're doing it with a roll of my own PLA on a 0.4 nozzle. Just see how it works with a non-optimized file for this printer. And then finally I want to do ABS, because I do a lot of printing in ABS, and it's really probably one of the more difficult plastics to print, so I want to see how it does. But right now, let's follow this print and see how it does with this one. Now I blew it and I turned off the lights in the garage about 3/4 of the way through this print, so we missed the last part of the print on the time lapse, but I want to get up really close on this thing and check out the detail. Now remember, this is with the 0.4 nozzle running a standard speed, and we still have a ton of great detail in there. Tiny little bit of stringing, if you can see it right in there, tiny bit. But this was running on the normal speed, not the slow speed for really the high precision. So impressive with this. This is also printed with 0 supports, and I also didn't even print a brim or a skirt on this one. So now while I'm waiting for the PETG to dry, I'm going to take this guy off, and I'm going to go up top, switch the rollout. I want to play around with some ABS. So right now we're about halfway through this print, and this honestly isn't making sense to me. This is ABS. It's printing pretty darn fast for ABS, and the part cooling fan is on. I didn't bother to check any of the presets, and I never run part cooling when I'm printing ABS, but it seems to be printing fine with the part cooling fan on. So we're just going to let it run its course and see what it does. Well, ABS Benchy just finished, and this is arguably the best ABS print I think I've ever done, and no supports. This doesn't really make sense to me, in that pretty much all my experience printing with ABS involved having it in an enclosure, also not running cooling fans. Now I do notice here there is a little bit of layer separation in there, and I'm not really surprised by that, because that seems to always be a problem. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but there's a little bit of layer separation there. That seems to be a problem with ABS. ABS flexes a lot with temperature changes, so if you have any sort of a temperature change, even slight, while it's printing, the part will warp and you'll have those problems. So I want to print this thing again, but inside an enclosure to keep the heat around it, the air temperature around it, constant. So we're going to give it one more shot inside an enclosure, see if we can prevent that layer separation there and see how it comes out. I'm also kind of tempted to go into the slicer and turn off the part cooling fan, because that could be the issue there with that little crack right there. Wish the camera was rolling for this. After I turned the camera off, I was playing around with a little bit more. I found another little layer separation issue up in the wheelhouse and gave it a little bit of pressure and it popped apart. So definitely some layer adhesion issues with ABS, but I have a feeling that's because of either the part cooling fan or the fact that we're not in an enclosure. So I'm going to put this thing in an enclosure, turn off the part cooling fan, and see how it does. So I'm monitoring from outside the enclosure, and I can see we are laying down plastic, and it does seem to be going well. I checked the part fan is not running, and we've gotten into actually building the part. We're no longer on the support, so that seems to be working correct. One thing I did notice, though, was when I came up here, this is the temperature gauge that I run inside it, and it's reading 89 air temperature inside. So checking in on this guy, we're about halfway through the print here, and things are looking good. It's hard to really tell exactly what's going on because I gotta look through that enclosure, but it looks fine just like the last one. Time will tell, and we'll only really know once we pull the part out. All right, so our print is finished, and from a distance, it looks like we have a successful ABS print. I don't see any separation in the layers, and I don't see any other issues, so I think that was the trick. All right, so now the PETG is finally dry in the dryer, so it's time to give it a shot through. We're just going to print a simple Benchy just to see what it does with the presets that are already loaded in the slicer. So I got the alert on my phone and came out to find this, a completed Benchy, still stuck to the print bed. So getting in closer on it, there's a little bit of stringing here and there. You look at the top of the roof and it might not be quite as smooth as when this thing was printing with PLA, but it still came out really well and it was a relatively quick print. Now, in addition to printing in ABS, I also wanted to be able to print in TPU, and this is the first printer I've had that has a direct drive so it can print in TPU. So the first time I tried to print this case, it ran into a little bit of an extruder issue. The extruder kind of jammed up and the wheels were just spinning against the filament. But after unloading the thing and reloading it and running it again, it worked just fine. This is the old iPhone that I film all my time lapses with. So I needed to print out a case for the thing because I have a bad habit of dropping things. You can see here, it is a rubbery, flexible case. So now, the phone that I'm using to print all my time lapses is a little bit more protected in case I drop it. So now that you've seen us run this thing all the way through its paces, let's go over the pros and cons. Start with the pros first. The first, and I think the most significant pro, is this thing is by far the easiest and most versatile 3D printer I have ever worked with. So speaking of versatility when it comes to filaments, I ran this thing through a ton of different filaments, really the most common ones most people will print with. I printed with PLA, PLA+, PETG, ABS, and TPU. And I didn't have any major issues with any of them, although I will get to a con when it comes to it in just a second. Now, the slicing software that I mentioned earlier was really good and impressive. It is meant to work with this machine, so it slices specifically for this machine. And it allows it to print much, much faster. The part I'm printing right now is a higher speed print. It has presets for most of your common filaments in it, and most of those presets are pretty spot on, but I will get to those in the cons, so you're going to want to stay tuned through the cons to hear about some of the cons I ran into. Setup and assembly was very easy, and the instructions were really good. It pretty much walked you through it. This thing is built like a tank. My LK5 Pro is a great printer, but there is some wobbliness to it, and it needed to get tightened down, and there was a lot of DIY aspect to that printer. This thing, you can take it out of the box with no 3D printing experience, set this thing up using the instructions, and get your first print off, no problem. Now, the speed that this printer can print at is nothing but impressive. Right now, the print I'm doing right here is going to be a 4-hour print, which sounds like a long time. But if I had done this on the LK5 Pro using Cura, it was going to be a 9-hour print. So it cut the print speed in half doing the exact same print. Now, they also have some files loaded into their app, and that was that Benchy I showed at the very beginning, which are designed to print at extremely high speed. And that's where you can get a Benchy off in like 16 minutes, when it would take a typical printer an hour or so to get a decent Benchy. So now let's talk about the cons, because even though I really like this printer and I was impressed with it, not everything's perfect, so we do have to hit on some of the downsides. Once we're done with that, I'll do a final kind of recap of all my thoughts in one big thing. So, first con. I talked about this earlier on, but this is the more budget version of their other printer, and it does not come with a screen. At a minimum, a screen would have been nice, because I'd like to be able to walk out to my shop and take a look at this thing and see how far along on a print it is without having to get my phone out or check my computer. Now, one thing when I first started printing with this thing that I thought was a con, but it turned out not to be that big of a deal, was I don't like devices that you need to have internet access for, because this thing communicates through your internet. You don't actually need to have internet to make this thing work. It can connect to it via Bluetooth from your phone, and there is actually a USB port on the side of it, so if you're using your computer, you can actually straight USB into it, and there is also a place on the side for a memory card. So you can load the G-code files onto a memory card, we go to the traditional one, and then hit the play button there, and it will start printing the most recent file on that card. Now, the downside, again, is because you don't have a screen, it's only going to print the most recent files. So you don't have a way to select, if you have multiple files on a card, which one you want it to print. Now, another thing I ran into was PLA settings in the slicer on the computer were perfect. I mean, I've never had a problem with PLA. When you get into some of the other filaments, though, I ran into a few little issues. Some of the temperatures were a little wonky when I tried to print with PETG, and I tweaked those, and then it printed fine. But the biggie was with ABS. With ABS, it had the cooling fan, which you can hear right now on the part cooling, turned on. You want that on for PLA, you don't want it on for ABS, and it was turned on. The other thing with ABS is you typically want this whole thing in an enclosure to control the air temperature, and it doesn't mention that anywhere in the app or in the slicing software. So if you were brand new to 3D printing, you wouldn't know that and be wondering why your ABS prints were failing. Now, the good news is none of that is hardware stuff. So Anker, if you're watching this video, if you tweak those things in your slicer, it'd be perfect. And if a little warning could come up and say, hey, if you're printing with ABS, you might want to stick something over this thing to enclose it, it'd be a good idea. Now, one thing that is worth at least mentioning is the nozzles. I don't really know if this is a con, but it's worth mentioning. This here is a typical nozzle for a 3D printer. over here are the nozzles for the MC5. Notice the difference? The nozzle itself is pretty much the same, but the actual threaded area is longer. These are the ones that you get for dime a dozen, and this is what most 3D printers take. These ones are available and you can pick them up, but if you already have another 3D printer and you've got a bunch of parts and nozzles, your old parts won't fit. Now, that being said, if you're printing with PLA or a standard filament that's not going to wear a nozzle out, you're almost never going to be changing these things out, so it probably isn't that big of a deal. Another very cool thing that this thing has, which I mean pretty much every printer has, is the ability to print 0.2 nozzles as well as 0.4. But all those presets are also set up already in the slicer, so you're not playing a guessing game. And like I showed before, the resolution that this thing can get with a 0.2 nozzle is amazing. And finally, there's the price. This is not an inexpensive printer. This thing comes in at about $360. But that being said, it's also not a cheap printer. This thing is built like a tank and works really well. So now let's get into the final recap and we'll talk about whether that price is worth it and who I think this... All right, so let's start by tackling who is this thing for. For starters, if you are a new person to the hobby, you've never owned a 3D printer before, maybe you're not that tech savvy, this is a great 3D printer for you. You don't need to know a lot about or really anything about 3D printing to get this thing working. The assembly is very easy, the slicer is very easy, the app is very easy to use. You can go from it showing up on your doorstep to a complete print in really under an hour. Now the temptation is there. You're a first-time printer buyer and you don't want to spend a lot of money and you decide, you know what, I'm going to go get myself something like this. I guarantee you, if you buy something like this as your first printer, you are going to be frustrated and you're going to throw it in the trash. Now this thing only costs 70, 80 bucks, but that's 70, 80 bucks that you're probably going to wind up throwing in the trash. I know this price sounds steep, but what's frustration worth to you? That thing is going to be frustrating. I can guarantee you this one will not be. The only person I don't think this thing is for the hobbyist that wants to tweak and tinker with their printer. And there is a whole community of people that love doing that. I've modified the heck out of my LK5 Pro to get it working exactly how I want it. And I've had a lot of fun doing that. But if you want to modify or tweak on your printer, this is not the printer for you. This thing is really not built to be modifiable. It's built to basically stick on your workbench or stick on your table, hit print and go. So if you're looking for a hobbyist experience where you're going to be tweaking on it, you're not going to be doing that with this printer. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, please hit that subscribe button because we've got lots more Tech Tuesday episodes coming out. We also do Workbench Wednesdays, which is more tool related. This thing's on the workbench, so maybe it should have been a Workbench Wednesday. I don't know. But if this video did help you out, give it a great big thumbs up. If you have any questions about this printer, 3D printing in general, or have suggestions for the channel, leave me a comment down below. I'm always responding to comments, trying to help out our viewers. And of course, thanks for watching.
And now for the promised Halloween print. Now it's pretty cool actually when you go into the app for this thing, they keep uploading new stuff and they seem to do it by whatever holidays come up. Right now they've got Halloween stuff. So we printed this thing in glow in the dark PLA. Check this out when you turn the lights off.